Welcome back to This Was Supposed to Be Easy, your go-to podcast for connection, joy, and a good dose of laughter.
Hosted by two friends who've seen enough of life to know that it's never as simple as it sounds.
Or looks.
Each conversation celebrates the diverse journeys we travel, the moments of bravery, the strength we didn't know we had, and the joy we find along the way.
Because let's be honest, life is full of things that were supposed to be easy, but turned out to be harder.
And definitely funnier.
Than we thought. This is Amy.
And this is Cheryl. And if it were easy, we wouldn't be here. Last week, Amy, we talked about being the person giving feedback. And even, are you the person to give feedback? And we promised everyone that we would take a step. I don't know if it'll be a tiptoe or a jump into receiving feedback. And I'm excited to talk about that with you today and think about, I almost want to say ouch, ouch moments, right?
Yep.
Where I didn't necessarily receive it well. Or even, in long-term relationships, I'm thinking about my spouse, there are points in time where, he'll say, well, you don't even want to hear this. Or I know you're going to get mad when I say this. Maybe let's jump in today and think about ourselves. Maybe we'll go outside of that as well, but ourselves and what it's like to get feedback. Sometimes that might be good feedback. Sometimes it might be feedback we don't want to hear. Sometimes it's feedback we need.
Sometimes it's feedback that we don't need.
Yeah.
And what that looks like.
Yeah. So I bet we're going to get some good stories as we dig into this conversation, but I think let's get to it.
Well, I'm excited to hear this one. I've been having some kind of, one of the things that when we have these conversations online, we've usually had some version, or I find myself asking, because I love to ask questions of people, like, what are the thinks that you've been thinking? What are your big thinks lately? And so I find myself asking a lot of people in my life that question. They've just become used to it now. But receiving feedback is one. I was actually talking with my sister not that long ago. I had gotten some positive feedback as a parent, and it was that one of my children was kind of a good human and had done something really good in front of this other set of parents and was just very positive, and they were impressed and gave me feedback on that, and that was really awesome. And we were talking about this child in particular, and it was often, though, that one of the ways they receive feedback is being open and also being coachable. They've received feedback positively about being coachable. And so my sister and I, it led us to a discussion about how important is it to be coachable in life long after sports are done. But what does that mean to be coachable? And I can't think of that without thinking about receiving feedback and being a good receiver of feedback. So I thought that could be something that we could kind of go with this because it's a skill set. I think giving feedback is a skill set that people need to develop, but I think getting feedback needs to be a skill set. And so I think too with that, even if you've been a poor receiver of feedback in the past, you always can get better.
Right. There's always room to grow. And so many thoughts, right? So many thoughts just went through my head because you talked about coaching and being coachable. And when we talk about coaching, I think a lot about the skill of asking questions. You ask such amazing questions. I love how you can pull people into conversation by asking questions, whereas I often will struggle with, there's a lot of silence happening right now because I can't think of a question to ask, right? One of those coaching skills is, to ask the kind of question that just gets someone comfortable with sharing and talking. And sometimes I'll get questions. I think it's certain people you have long-term relationships with, right? Sometimes I'll get questions and all I can think is, what's the real question? These are stepping stones to something.
Feelers.
Yes, and I'm already uncomfortable with it,
Mhm.
but I'll engage for now. But I did actually catch myself very recently, and I can't even remember who I was talking to, just went right to, "What's the real question?" And I did it, and I put it out there, but I think I did it because that really was where I wanted to get, right? I didn't wanna play the game. I didn't wanna engage in the dance of let's tiptoe for 20 minutes to what you really wanna get to talking to me about. Let's just go there. I'm ready right now.
Yeah, well, I think that that is also something too, like, that to me, it makes me think of, do we already have a relationship
Mhm,
where we don't need the song and dance? Like, we
mhm,
don't need the lead up, just ask the
mhm,
question.
mhm,
Or I don't know if I want to engage in the song and dance with you. And so
mhm.
by asking the question, I know how I'm going to feel within a second of you asking it of, am I gonna give it to you? And, like, am I gonna give you the real answer, or am I gonna give you the polished answer and then we're done with this? Like, like, I think of it that way.
Yeah,
Like, to me, it's almost like the quicker way of saying, "Do we have rapport or not?"
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's almost like that test of, like,
yeah,
do we have rapport?
yeah. And sometimes it just hurts, but it's important, right? Rapport aside, my brain just jumped way back in time to a lesson I learned. Again, I don't think it went to rapport in this case. Maybe it did. I so as a young teacher, I remember thinking, actually I remember being taught that as a teacher, what happens during the day in your classroom as you're working with child's behaviors, for example, so a child's exhibiting behaviors, make sure that you're not calling the parent to report this problem. Deal with it. Work with the child, deal with it. You don't want them to go home and get punished for it.
Right.
And I know that at some point in time somewhere that was something that was said to me. Don't take what you're working through in the classroom, call the parents at home and, then they get in trouble about it. And I remember my nephew had a lot of, he just was really active
I
as
had a child that I
yes,
received a lot of
yes.
the communication
And
with.
I
Yeah.
do remember my sister-in-law saying to me, if I could ever walk in the door of that school and hear something good about my child, it's always negative.
Yep.
And that reinforced, this scenario
Mhm.
that I had learned as
Mhm.
I was going through school. But I'll never forget that there's a balance. And the moment that I learned more about that balance in that sort of scenario was when I had finished a school year, right? I had finished a school year, gone through the summer, come back to the next year, and the phone rang in the classroom, and it was a parent from the year before. And they're like, my child is in kindergarten, and they're telling me he does this, and he does this. And you never said that. So is my child different? Is the place different? Or did you not tell me? And I had to sit with that and think, I didn't tell you. I dealt with all of that.
Right.
And I thought I was doing a good thing by working through it each day,
Mhm.
but I never let you know it. And that's where I think that balance, as far as there was feedback she needed in her parenting and then thinking about what next for my child that I didn't provide.
Mm.
But I went to the far extreme by not sharing anything about that with her, and then she was knocked off her feet when there were all of these problems happening at the kindergarten level, and maybe the kindergarten teacher was oversharing, right? But the middle ground was she didn't know at all.
Right.
And for me, that was feedback as a very young teacher to think about, ooh, there are extremes.
Mhm.
And I failed to to share some important information with a parent. And
Yeah.
I had to sit with that and really think, this is important feedback
Mm.
that I needed to hear
Yeah.
that influenced who I am today still, right? And how I think about what Where, when, how, why?
Why, I think, is the big one. It reminds me of Kim Scott. She does an amazing TED Talk on radical candor. And so I strongly encourage anybody to watch her TED Talk on radical candor. But one of the things she talks about with radical candor is to give the feedback if you if someone has the ability to succeed, but when you don't give them the radical candor. So in this situation, she tells the story of that she has an employee who everybody liked. Everybody liked this person and that they were great, but they weren't doing the job. Their reports were messy. And other people then started saying, like, we can't do our job because
We're fixing
we're
their stuff.
fixing their stuff. Like, and it became this issue. And so they finally then were let go. And the story goes to say that he came to her and said, "You never told me. Like, you never told me I was not doing like, I wasn't doing the thing."
How can I fix it if
Right,
I
right, how can I fix it? But also now everybody has this opinion of me. I didn't know, and now I have to leave. I can't save face. Like,
Mm,
yes, I'm being let go or whatever, but, like, there's no way for me to
to
come back from
fix
this
this here?
right here.
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder too about, like, that parent that you were just talking about. Like, when we do care about somebody and we have that radical candor, I care enough to see you succeed,
Mhm,
then I do need to give, but
mhm,
also we learn now in early childhood, and I think just in teaching, like, the partnerships with parents, like
mhm,
how do we have these partnerships? But I can also say from the parenting perspective, I remember having one of my children was much like your nephew,
mhm,
and I remember a teacher who I knew to be a good teacher. Oh, she gave me a lot of information about him that was very negative. And
mhm.
it to the point it had me finally saying, like, "Do you even like him?"
Yes, yes,
I said, like,
exactly.
I remember saying that one time, and I was like, "I really feel like you don't like him."
Yeah, and
And
there's a difference
there is
between helpful feedback and you're clearly showing your dislike for my child. This is a
yes,
problem.
yes, exactly. And so that is then where if you listen to last week, I where we were talking about giving feedback, I said your opinion. Like when you start putting in your opinion when you're giving feedback. So I'm going to bring that into this conversation here.
Okay.
If I'm giving feedback, I have to make sure that I'm giving information that can be helpful, not necessarily I should never label my opinion as fact. And so when I'm getting feedback, knowing that I am getting feedback, am I getting your opinion? And I need to take that into account that, yes, that's
Mhm,
one thing to consider.
mhm,
Or am I getting information that I really should be
mhm,
opening? And maybe they're the same. Maybe getting your opinion is what I need to be receiving. And I get to choose what I want to do with that. But that is kind of the thought. Like, what am I getting from you? Am I getting a dose of that lens that you don't like my kid?
mhm.
Or am I getting a dose of, I genuinely care about the success of your child?
Right.
And I know that there is a way that we can work around
Yeah.
this.
You just took us back to relationship building and
Mm.
trust and all of those pieces. And as you were talking, I could hear myself and I could hear other people sometimes say, "This is my opinion." And sometimes your opinion, leave it off the table, right?
Mhm,
Like it's not a part of what we need. But when something really is your opinion and you're going to share it, practice throwing that in there.
mhm.
I have an opinion about blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
Would you like to hear it or not?
right.
And,
Or I think even saying, "Is now an appropriate time to share it?"
yeah,
Is
yeah,
it maybe you do wanna hear it, but maybe now isn't the appropriate time.
yeah. So speaking of timing, as you know, I've done a lot of traveling
Mhm.
in the last, I would say, few months, but literally, 2 weeks in Sweden and Finland, 1 week at home to plant all the flowers that I hope survive, make it.
Right?
Then another 2 weeks in Italy, and now I'm home again. And as far as the timing goes, often I will ask for feedback, obviously, when I've planned experiences for groups, whether that's a travel learning experience, a retreat, a conference. I do need that feedback to help things get better. There were some things in one of those trips where I know, right? Like I would do it differently next time. And I've been playing with timing on that, right?
Mhm.
Like, I haven't asked for people's written feedback yet because sometimes I like to use some of the phrases people say to promote future experiences. And I'm like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to hear what I know is coming my way about a few things. I'm not saying the whole,
Right.
a whole trip or anything was bad, but you just made me think about that, right? When you were talking about timing, because I know people need a chance to share. I know that I need to hear, but there was just this little sensitive piece of me that's like, "Maybe not yet."
Right. I think about that too, and being open to receiving feedback. I do think there's a headspace you have to be in
Mhm.
because otherwise, if you are not in the right headspace, so I can only speak for myself here, but I ask for a lot of feedback within my line of work. I create trainings, create conferences, same way that you're saying, and I'm asking for feedback. And I have to remember, like, I asked for this, like, and I'll sometimes read something and I'm like, well, and I'm like, nope, nope, this is not the time to,
I know who said this.
right, this is not the time to defend myself. This is not, I asked for this. And I have also tried to take on the mentality of, I don't get to choose somebody else's lived reality. And so, or their perceived perception
Mhm.
of that reality. I get to choose what I do with that, but I don't get to say whether they experience something that way or not. So with
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
feedback, I often say like, "Okay, all right, this one person had this challenge." But then what I've also had to teach other people then, because another part of this then is when I ask her feedback, somebody else might be receiving it and then bringing it to me, like collecting it and bringing it to me. So this is what I've had to also teach other people because I had to learn it myself. And so this is something, if I have 2,000 people providing feedback and one person didn't like the spaghetti,
Mhm.
do I never serve spaghetti again?
Right.
Or if I had 1,000 people, so 50% of those 2,000 people
Complain about the food.
complain about the food, do we need to do something about the food?
Mhm.
And so it's that idea of knowing how many people, how big was the complaint, how easy is it to change, and then percentage-wise, does it warrant a change?
Yeah.
If somebody comes in and says, like, "My basic human rights weren't being met, like, this happened,"
Mhm.
one or two people saying that might
It's
warrant a
important.
change.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
important. If somebody comes in and says, "I didn't like the blue drapes," well, you know what? Maybe we'll be at a place next time where they're yellow. Like, I mean, it's that kind of thing. And so I think you have to, as a good feedback receiver, really think about, is this feedback from one person? Is this feedback from a pretty sizable percentage? Is this something I have control over? If we outsource our food and people didn't like the spaghetti, okay, maybe I don't outsource my food to that person again.
Mhm.
But do I take it like they just murdered my grandma's beloved spaghetti recipe? Like, no, I don't need to climb on that hill to die up there that, that person was really upset about, that they didn't enjoy the flavor. And I know I use that a little jokey, but I think that is still, it's to give the point of not all feedback is equal. And so when you are opening yourself up to multiple, so if you, let's say, led 20 people and one person complained about something, that's very different than if 15 people and it was a general theme you saw in all the feedback.
Mhm. So that's a great example of you in an organization or you in a group,
Mhm.
right? A large group of people. I'm thinking now, like, let's talk about the people we choose to be around.
Yes.
And that for me, that would include my friends,
Mhm.
my friend group, or even professionally, who I begin to align with, who I seek out as a mentor, and how that might influence, I think, who I choose to be around, I guess. When I think about the feedback that someone's giving me, I think back in time, I think about novels I'm reading. I think about those moments in time where you are surrounded by people whose feedback is meant for good
Mhm.
versus maybe noticing that you're around someone and you had a bit more choice or control in the scenario and their feedback wasn't of pure intention.
Sure. Yes.
Um, and I don't know why. I guess I'm just scaling it down a little bit
Mhm.
from we've talked about, bigger scenarios, to maybe the people we spend much of our time with outside of work, maybe even.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of a conversation I had yesterday with a friend who we were talking about we were actually talking about therapy.
Mhm.
And in this situation, she mentioned that she was shopping for a new therapist, that she really enjoyed
Mhm.
the therapist that she had, but they just kept validating everything she was saying. And
Like AI.
yeah, almost like,
What a
what a
wonderful
wonderful
idea."
thing, right, and she said that it was great to hear that in the moment, but it actually got really repetitive,
Mhm.
and that she needed somebody to question because she was questioning herself,
Mhm.
and she wanted somebody to offer up an alternative opinion
Mhm.
or an alternative
Or at
option.
least help me get outside this box.
Right, and it makes me think of that too, like, so as you're talking about the people you surround yourself with, I think I'm reminded even of a conversation we might have had here before. I think there are certain people in my life I go to for certain types of feedback. You
Yes.
know, I have individuals that if I need the cheerleader, I would go to like this person, this person, this person. If I need somebody to give it to me harshly, I might go to this person, this person, this person. Like there's a level of knowing who in the same way I think of like your style of giving feedback, there's a level in being the receiver of knowing who's going to give you the feedback that you need in that moment? Like, do you need the harsh reality? Like, do you need someone to say, like, yeah, you screwed up?
Mhm.
You know, like, ugh.
And here's what we do
And
next.
right, like, and it's gonna hurt for a bit, but like, we're gonna fix this. We
Mhm.
can do this. You can do this. Like,
Yeah.
I am fully believe in you. Or is it somebody that's going, you need somebody to say, this is not as big of a deal as you think it is. You know, like, yes, something happened and you know what? They shouldn't have done this. And this is more on them than, and maybe, softening those edges or somebody to kind of give it to you in the middle. Yeah, you screwed up. This is gonna hurt. And you're fully capable of doing this. And you know what? You weren't solely to blame.
Okay, so our book club is
Mhm.
actually reading a book right
Yes.
now this summer. The book is the book club for troublesome women, I
Yes.
believe, and so a lot of that is on my mind, right? And a little historical, right? So the book I think is taking place in the 60s or 70s.
60s. Yeah.
Okay, and many of these women have been told that their role in life is to take care of everybody else, and that's pretty clear in that they're questioning that in the book. But what you just said when you were talking about who you go to for different kinds of feedback just made me think about that book in terms of giving, 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 giving for everyone. And we need the skill of self-awareness, right? Like
Yes.
we must dedicate time and space to knowing who we are,
Hmm.
and not who we are for everybody else, but who we are. And knowing ourselves well enough to be able to make those choices about, in this moment, I just need to cry. Or in this moment, I need someone to not gloss something over that where I made a mistake, but to help me acknowledge that mistake and move forward, right? Because if they're just going to gloss it over and tell me, no, no, you're fine. Everything you did is okay. It's all going to be okay. That doesn't help me move to the next step and take that next step. And so I just want, I don't know, I felt like I needed to just step in with what you were saying and say, yes, our own self awareness and time dedicated to understanding what our dreams are, what our goals are, what our hopes are, what our whys are,
Mhm.
and who we are as a person can help us receive feedback.
Yes. It's really interesting that you say this. I'm reminded of a situation a couple years ago. So I'm sure I've talked about this before, but I was on our local school board. We were part of a situation a few years ago. And around COVID time, if anybody paid attention to school boards, was going on politically, you might remember that everybody had an opinion about everything and would come and bring them to the school board very loudly.
You weren't
Was
just on the school board, Amy. You were the
I was the
president,
president of
so
the school board
you
that yeah.
really had to like manage.
Yeah, and I was on the receiving end of a lot of people's really big feels.
Yes.
And I had to decide what I wanted to do with that. And so I took a couple of different things. I really so Brene has I don't think it was Dare to Lead. She talks about the Teddy Roosevelt speech about being in the arena. And that one really hit home. It helped me get through a lot of it. And it was about how if you are like, look to the people that are in the arena with you, that are down there on the grass, on the ground with you, that are bloody and broken. And that's who you would want to receive feedback
Mhm.
from. It's not the people that are clean up in the
The
bleachers, the
loft.
loft. Yeah, right. Like in the arena, yelling, sideline coaching,
Mhm.
telling you what it is that you should have been doing better. And so being mindful of that. But I also remember in that time period to get through it all, I kind of would say feedback is just data. It's just data that I get to choose how long it spends time in my body.
Mhm.
So if I envisioned a piece of data, like almost as if it was a snowflake or a molecule, and I breathed it in, or I took it in through my ears or took it in through my senses, I got to decide then, does it swirl around my body and go out, or does it swirl around my body and become a part of me? And so with every piece of that, it was, okay, you know what? This I care about. This, I want to be a better version of myself. I'm going to take this piece. This, I'm going to hold on to. This is somebody else's business. Like, I don't even need to take this in for longer than a breath. I'm going to
Let
breathe it
them.
in, breathe it out. Right,
Let them.
exactly. But I'm going to take it in. I'm going to send it out, right up back out to you. I used what I needed, and then just maybe it's a realization that other people have really big feels right now, that type of stuff. But then also, where it became very important with that information was the self awareness to say, okay, so like this is an example. I was having to provide a lot of updates and a lot of information to
Mm.
other people. And a lot of people had feelings of how I was doing that.
Mhm.
Within the role that I was in, I remember feeling like, "Okay, I have to do this. I might not want to, but I have to do it." And so I did it. And I was as tuned in as people needed me to be for this situation. And then when it was done and everything was wrapped up, I was able to say, "And now I'm passing the torch because I'm never going to do that again."
Mhm.
And so I think there is knowing a level of ourselves. So when people are giving us feedback, we need to have also a self awareness level to say, you know what they're saying is accurate. And this is not an area of myself I'm going to work on right now.
Mhm.
I like who I am.
Mhm.
That is on them. And I am not going to choose to invest in changing this. And so I think there is that level of awareness to say, and if I'm not, and somebody else needs it to be that way, then I'm not the person for them. I
Mhm.
think of that way with relationships as well when it like, I was talking, about dating the other day, and it was actually really interesting. I think it led to a conversation because of a TikTok, and I saw this TikTok, and it was, like, all these guys, and somebody had, like, cut this thing, and they were saying, like, "Oh, well, women used to be like this, and they're not like this anymore," and, "Oh, I can't find a girl that does this or can't do that," and it was all these things, and it was very negative about women, and I just couldn't help but think, like, yes, okay, and the fact that you think a woman should be doing those
That's
things
where the real
is
problem is.
also a level of self-awareness. So if you want a woman who, is going to do X, Y, and Z for your every women need, that's a bigger issue. And so there was also a discussion. I think we've even had it at book club. We've had a talk, and I'm finding more and more women, especially the older that they get, like if something were to happen to their spouse or they were to find themselves out of a relationship, would they choose to enter into another
My
relationship?
answer is no.
Right.
And I'm not saying that because it's a
No.
bad relationship, but like been a lot of investment
Right.
and in energy, time, emotion, and all the things. And I've said many times that that is that. And should something change in the future with, I'll say death, right?
Right. Right.
Um, that will be the face of Cheryl. That is single Cheryl.
Yes.
That's the answer.
Right. Well, and I've had a few friends that have recently gone through divorces and they've talked about, if they would start dating. There has been, I mean, we even did an episode on dating in your 40s and
One
50s.
of our
You're,
good friends,
yeah, yeah, we've
just
talked.
got married.
Right, right. We talk about these things. But it's so interesting to me about individuals that say, like, I would love a friendship. I'd love even a romantic relationship. But I have heard so many more individuals say, but I'm not willing to live with somebody again.
Mhm,
Like, I'm not willing to share my space.
mhm.
Or, yeah, I'd love somebody to go do something fun with, maybe go to a dinner, go to a movie. Like, I don't want to be lonely,
Right.
but I'm also not looking to invest in, something. And I think that there becomes kind of this awareness of too of do you want to use that feedback to be the best version of you for you, or are you looking to use that feedback to be the best version for someone else, and in turn you might lose. And so when I always think about getting feedback and doing something with it, who am I doing that for?
Mm,
And is it the right use of my resources? I always say time, effort, energy, money as resources. So is that the best use of it? And if the answer is no, then can you get to a point to say, thank you, I'll take that into
mhm.
consideration?
Can we keep the emotional low?
Right, right. Yep, that's something to consider. I will think about that. I might also think that I'm not going to use a piece of that information, or our relationship is not what I thought it was. That type of stuff as well. But like being coachable is very, very important. The other part of that is I think and we all should be coachable. But then I think are you being coached to the best version of yourself
Mhm,
for the right reasons?
mhm,
Because I also think about individuals in our life that might wish us harm
mhm,
in that, so as a parent, this is something that I think is difficult when we watch our children or watch children in our lives maybe fall in with people who don't have their best interest in heart. And you notice a shift or a change to fit in with another group of people, when you can say to your child or any child, or maybe it's not even a child, maybe it's just a person in your life that you're recognizing with this, like, just make sure that you're taking feedback from people who have your best interest in heart,
mhm,
who are here for your success over your demise.
mhm,
And I think that that is something that is not always easy to know. And especially for the people pleasers that you talked about earlier,
Yeah. Yeah.
in that way.
So let's, as we maybe are closing in on wrapping this up, I think then, the different levels and categories and kind of bringing that in, you just talked about the people who do have your best interest at heart, who might not be in that new group that you've been hanging out with,
Mm.
but maybe let's finish with.
Well, if we're gonna finish, let me jump in with one more thing before that, just because I said we were gonna bring it back up in this episode and we haven't yet
Okay.
from last week.
Okay.
And that was receiving feedback from AI. And
Oh.
the reason I just want to bring that up and bring it into it,
Mhm.
is because I think it's really important, because that's another part that kind of goes with like the best interest in mind. Do I have a vested interest in your success enough to tell you legitimate changes that can be made to whatever situation to make the best version of yourself?
Mhm.
Or are we in a relationship where I have to provide you feedback? And so I'm going to go about this in the easiest way possible.
Mhm.
And I think so, just the importance of knowing it. And the reason I wanted to just talk about it just really briefly is because it hits differently. And
Yeah.
I think it should hit differently. And so, as you are somebody who is receiving feedback, are you receiving feedback from somebody who knows you, somebody who cares about you, somebody who has your best interest, all of those types of things, and then choosing to take it? Or, and what are you taking it for? So, like, if we think about, okay, feedback being that, like, you needed to cross the, dot that I and put the punctuation in the right spot and use the right form of there, and there, those types of things, then yeah, that might be a great use of AI feedback. Is it that, you're turning in a project for a grade and you kind of want to know what type of grade you would get on it based on what you wrote already? Do you want to be able to do that? But don't use AI for the idea of what type of human am I?
Yes.
Like, am I a good human?
Yeah.
Am I, I need to have this conversation with somebody. Use AI to practice having the conversation. Don't use AI to script the conversation. Because
Yes.
keep your humanity in it.
Yes. It's funny that that took you back to AI because I was kind of leaning towards that flip piece of it. Like I was thinking about people you love,
Mhm.
right? Your partner, your children, which, you brought up several times. And can you imagine using AI to find out what your husband thinks about you or your wife
Sure.
thinks about you or, whatever it is? And even people that love you, sometimes when you're so close, it's not about giving me the best feedback, it's about their needs too, right? But those are the people that you have to negotiate life with.
Right.
While you're in that relationship, you have to negotiate life with. And so sometimes that feedback is about you, but sometimes it's about them. And that's why I think so, sometimes I instantly am angry,
Mhm.
right? And I have to think about that later. Like I have to think about can I work really hard in this moment? I know I'm going to get mad. Can I keep it at that? Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to think about it
Mhm.
level, or am I going to react with heat
Mhm.
and then give myself the time to be like, do I really need to think about this? Is this a behavior
Mhm.
I need to change? Or is this a behavior that by virtue of changing, I'm showing my love for someone else?
Right.
Are they asking too much?
Mhm.
Are they trying to change me? Um, or no, that was just good. I needed to hear that. I don't like hearing it,
Mhm.
but I
It's
needed to
hard.
hear it. Right.
Mhm.
But that again, I think it just circles back to it being, are they genuine? Are they authentic? Do I know myself enough to know, no,
Mhm.
not that one.
Right.
Like that's going too far. We need to talk more about that.
Mhm.
Or is it a, oh yeah, I don't love what you just said, but you're probably right with that one. Need to keep that open mindset, I guess is where I'm going with that. When the more personalized it gets, sometimes the harder it is, but also it remains something we have to think about and we don't just say yes, ma'am
Mhm. Right.
or yes, sir, because I'm a person too and I have let's negotiate this, right? There's negotiation, I guess is the word I was thinking about.
Sure. Well, and it makes me think about, so if, to our listeners, we've talked about challenges and things like that. And I know in the past we've talked about like board of directors or trusted advisors.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like the board of directors, as in the
Like,
people
right,
we've
like our own
chosen.
person, right, as the
Yes.
people we've chosen. And so I think about that. Like, let's say you decided you had a skill you needed to work on. Maybe it's receiving feedback,
Mhm.
but you have a skill. Do you have those trusted advisors? Do you have that board of directors? Do you have the people in your life that you can go to and say, "Give it to me real," and then you take that information? Like, maybe all you do is say, "Thank you very much," at the end of that conversation, and then you get to choose what to do with it, but you went to the people you trusted
Mhm.
to give you
Mhm.
real feedback.
And no one can know what you're thinking about as you process that,
Right.
right? And think about going forward. No one can assume they know what's going on in your head, and that's your space to process it
Yes.
and think about it.
Yeah, and so I would kind of challenge everybody who's listening, think about how you are at getting feedback. So think about the last time somebody gave you a piece of information. Were you defensive? Were you excited? Did you absorb it into yourself and it now lives within you? Did you breathe it in and breathe it out? And so now it's somewhere in the ether and you took what you wanted from it. And so that is something that I would kind of challenge everybody as you're thinking about who you are in the way of getting feedback. Who do you want to be when it comes to getting feedback? And what could you do to get from who you currently are to where you want to be? Thanks for tuning in to This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Remember, the best stories are the ones we live.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going, because life may not be easy, but listening in should be.
Stay curious, stay connected, and keep wondering.